You are really lucky because usually on Friday evenings, I stand here and give a kind of state of the school talk, and you're spared that this evening. We'll get into that tomorrow. But tonight, we are so thrilled to welcome Tim Ryan back to the school for his 25th reunion. Do you know when to like boo and clap? And we've got a whole section.
I'm just going to feed him all the answers. It's C.
A proud graduate of UNH Franklin Pierce, Tim went on to represent Northeast Ohio in the U.S. Congress for more than 20 years. And today, he serves as president and CEO of Celtic Consulting, which I had to practice being in New England. I realized I'd been in New England long enough where I wanted to call it Celtic Consulting, where he advocates for America's workers and industries and national security while also promoting innovative approaches to health and wellness. He is also the author of 2 books, both of which I absolutely love, on mindfulness and food systems, and remains deeply committed to family life in Ohio with his wife, Andrea, and their 3 children. We're going to have a conversation. I promise I won't stand here for the whole
Yeah, that'd be weird.
And we're going to cover the whole spectrum of issues tonight. Okay, Tim, it is so great to have you back here.
Thank you.
And
Great to be back.
I'm really excited.
Especially to see all my former classmates, old classmates. I walked up and I saw them and I was like, we all kind of look the same, don't we? I mean, I could recognize you, yeah.
Were you like, they all look old, but you don't?
Yeah, I was like, they look much older than I do. I just thought to myself, no, 20 years in Congress is like dog years, so.
That's exactly how I define Dean years.
Is that right?
People say, how long have you been a Dean? I'm like, well, 8, but it's more like 56.
Yeah, exactly.
It is a challenging time for leadership in all kinds of ways in different sectors right now. And today, we thought we would talk a little bit about what it means to cleanse the temple. And in our call, when we were talking about it, you've used that phrase a lot, cleansing the temple. And what does that mean kind of in the context of our present day? And what kind of lessons does that story hold for us right now?
It's the biblical story of cleansing of the temple. So you're going to get the 13 years of Catholic school, Tim Ryan, a little bit right now. When you're in Congress for 20 years, you really get immersed in policy and how to fix things through policy and investments and all of that. And then I've been out, I ran for Senate a few years ago, and I've been out now 2.5 years. And I just had a little more, I think, perspective on things. It looks much crazier on the outside than it actually is on the inside, if that even makes sense, because it's crazy on the inside. But I started to think like that there's a spiritual crisis in the country, and it's a crisis of connection, not necessarily spirituality in the sense of like a particular religion or certain dogma or certain rules that you have, but just like the idea of connection. And that we think because we have these devices that we're so much more connected now. In some ways we obviously are, but in a lot of ways these devices and the algorithms and everything else have made us more divided than we've ever been. And it's like I've always had this, like the book I wrote about meditation and mindfulness practices, and I'm practice centering prayer and stuff. So I have like the spiritual side that I really like enjoy. And I've had this political side, and I can't remember where somebody brought up the cleansing of the temple story, which I remembered from school, and I thought that's it. Like physically, mentally, for ourselves, we need a cleansing of our own. We've got to find ways to like not get caught up in the madness, and have ways, whether it's walking in nature or meditation or art or whatever, like to just let go, cleanse your own mind, cleanse your own temple so that you're not constantly in the rat race. And then obviously economically and culturally, like we need a cleansing too, like concentration of wealth and the level of sickness and in society, and diabetes and obesity and all of these things, like suicide rates and mental health issues. Like, so those systems need cleansed too, so that, I don't know why, but I just felt like that is like a really good story in my mind to like organize how we kind of need to move forward.
You know, I was reflecting on some of what you said. I was listening to one of your podcasts on the exhausted majority, and you were almost talking about, like, you were talking about maybe mindfulness and meditation as something about when you, like liquid, when you sort of shake it up and then you're sort of seeing it settle and your mind is clearing.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about this idea of a spiritual awakening or gathering, it almost strikes me as that's something that has been, when we think about like the MAGA movement, is compelling to people, I think, because there's a spiritual component to it. It
Sure.
touches people's spirits and sort of unifies around a common theme. When I try to talk about the law school and motivate people, I'm always reminding us of kind of our shared mission and the vision with which this school was created, which is a really unique vision, separate from any other law school, I think, in the United States. And so how do we, in a polarized world where you're talking about this, you know, we're on our devices and we're increasingly experiencing things that are so polarized, how do we develop now a shared vision and a shared spirituality for our country to unite around, where people are so divided?
It's really hard. You know, to slow down, to take the temperature down. It's really difficult. And I, as a Democrat, and I'm not going to get political, but I was talking at a Democratic dinner the other night with 200 or 300 people. And I said, you can't hate the other side. I mean, it's just, you're either adding hate or you're adding love and care and concern into the world. That's your one energetic being that's either adding that or you're adding something else. And we, if Democrats want to like persuade people to come our way, we got to just stop saying that we hate who's in office right now, because that's not going to move anybody. It's certainly not going to move anybody who's in, you know, on that side. And so I think it starts with just like, I don't know, this is where the law school here, we should be talking about law and stuff, but I think this is an important discussion. It's like, you got to open your heart up. Like, what's the first thing you do if you walk into a courtroom and you're trying to persuade a jury? They got to like you. You have to know, you know, through the process of getting the jury, you've got to understand who's sitting in that box. And you need to be a little bit vulnerable so they get to know you, so they start to trust you. And it's the same in the broader world. And I just think, like, we've got to take the temperature down. And I don't mean to say this politically, I really don't, but like, what happened, you know, to Charlie Kirk a couple weeks ago was absolute tragedy, you know, absolute horrific for anybody who saw it, experienced it, regardless of how you felt about the guy and his wife and his kids. And then what happened up in Minnesota, of course, a few months ago, same thing. Like, you know, anybody who's served in public office, it just scares the shit out of you to think, like, I just vote one way or have a certain belief and someone's going to come and do something like that. It's hard, and again, this is a commentary. It's hard if some of the top leaders in society are using those tragedies to continue the division, because tragedies have always been used, for the most part, to try to find some level of unity in it. And so I think in the current environment, it's hard. We can just do it in our own way, in our own lives, and we don't have to change the world, but we can change the tone at a school board meeting, or we can change the tone in our classroom, or you can change the tone in your business, and hopefully 1,000 points of light at some point, you know, can help.
Do you think that kind of, is that part of what, when you're talking about the exhausted majority, for example, do you think that almost can be itself a uniting force? Is everyone sort of being tired of that kind of divisiveness?
I think so. I think there's an
I mean, is that like lemonade
Who's
out
in
of
the
lemon?
exhausted majority right now politically? I mean, that's good. That's 50-60% of the people in this room. Yeah. So I think, again, you have to have like pragmatic solutions too. I think people are actually looking for new ideas, new ways of doing things. You all probably experience this too, especially the Franklin Pierce crowd, where we're always kind of immersed in technology and that kind of thing. Like just beneath this toxic political conversation that's going on is like a ton of really cool stuff. Like there's so many opportunities out there, and I work with some of these companies around AI and building permits and like speeding it up from like 2 years to like 2 months to like permit a building in a big city, which can draw investment and rehabilitate communities and all that. You look at AI in healthcare. You look at AI in education. Like, do we have to worry and put guardrails up and all that stuff? I'll let all the new graduates here figure that stuff out.
I think Lydia Irwin's figuring that out for us.
All right, Lydia,
right?
you're in charge.
Okay.
Give me your
Yep,
card
she's in charge.
before I leave. But like when you look at the opportunities of like educating kids, like there's this Alpha School that does AI, and I don't know if you've heard of it. It's really amazing. I just listened to a podcast on it, and they're like educating kids in like 2 hours a day because they have AI that will come in and they'll talk to a kid, and for reading, for example, they'll say, who are your friends on the playground? And they go through, it's DJ and it's Heidi and it's Angel, and then they make a story up for this kid about him and his friends. And then they create the story, so the kid is absolutely infatuated in figuring out how's the story end, who got in a fight and this and that, and they continue to improve his reading level. And they do the same with like a lot of the statistics around baseball or foul shooting percentage, like whatever you're interested in, it will create a curriculum for you, and within 2 hours, and then the rest of the day they're learning public speaking, they're learning life skills. Or I don't know if that's the answer. I listen to one podcast, so now I'm an expert like everybody else in the world who listens to one podcast and knows everything about everything. But I'm just saying, like, that's an exciting development when we're trying to compete and we see so many kids falling behind. So underneath the fear and anxiety and division are really cool things happening. And if we can like slow down enough to like understand that and get excited about that, we can have a new America or new like way of looking at things and some kind of renaissance in the country.
I listened to the same podcast probably, and so I was reflecting on this Alpha School yesterday, because we've been talking this week in particular, but over the last couple of years, we've seen a dramatic increase in students with mental health challenges and anxiety issues. And one of the things we were talking about yesterday, as a community, faculty and staff were just, students' lack of their discomfort with cold calling and answering questions in class, and especially I think COVID and having a lot of virtual learning may have exacerbated some social challenges that students have. And so I was thinking about that, the Alpha School, and thinking about our job as educators is not just to kind of impart knowledge anymore, but especially with AI, but we have to be thinking more about the soft skills of how you engage and connect with other human beings and communicate, and how to do sort of the entrepreneurial spirit, the public speaking, and all of that the school focuses on. And it made me also reflect on your book, A Mindful Nation, and how kind of mindfulness plays a role in thinking about, to help address issues of anxiety and so what was it like to have meditation circles on Capitol Hill?
Well, you should have seen my chief of staff's face when I came. He was an older guy. He'd been around the Hill. He worked for John Glenn. He had been around for a long time. He was in the Clinton administration. Then he became my chief of staff. And I walked into the office. I said, "Hey, Ron, you're never going to guess." He said, "What?" I said, "I'm going to write a book." "Oh, that's a great idea. What are you going to write it on?" I'm like, "Meditation." And he almost fell to the ground. He's like a Baptist from Oklahoma, and he was like, "This is not a good idea, Congressman. We need to talk about this." But it was, what's interesting about it was I had to do a lot of research on the brain because I wanted to like explain why is this working, these meditation techniques, and there's so many of them, but they do certain things to your brain. And what happens is when you are in fight or flight mode, which vast majority of the people in the country are right now, and a lot of, and I started like with the vets who are coming back from the war, and so I really started to try to understand. But when you're in fight or flight mode, your prefrontal cortex goes offline. You're in absolute survival mode. So your executive functions, your ability to reason, your working memory, your attention span, all offline. So if you get kids that are in tough neighborhoods, tough family situations, so on and so forth, literally are in a constant state of fight or flight. So I always tell people, like, it doesn't matter what your 10-point policy plan is on education. If you can't get the kid out of fight or flight mode, they're not going to learn. And it's a lot of it's the same with the diet and the dyes and the sugar and all that other stuff too. And so I tried to have people like on Capitol Hill, we did what's called a quiet time caucus. And I didn't want to scare anybody with the big M word. So we would just sit, and if they needed a technique, I'd teach it to them, and if not, we'd just sit there and quiet. But we started at one point, got 70, 80 people there with staff and everything else, because it was just a place to go and be quiet. And like a lot of members of Congress would come to hide from their staff. They would just like, can't call him, he's in quiet time caucus. So I think that's why I got more popular. But it was really...
Okay, I totally think we need quiet time caucus around here.
Can't find the dean. Yeah. She's, and so, yeah, and that was really it. But it became, we eventually started a whole wellness program for the House off of that quiet time caucus. But it was interesting that, and I just would say, members of Congress who wouldn't admit it publicly, after I wrote the book, they would come up to me and they were like, hey. I'm like, hey, what's up? Like, can you tell me about this meditation stuff? I'm like stressed out of my mind. And it was like the stigma of like, it's like, what, you're not allowed to like stop? Like that's basically where we are, right? You're not allowed to stop. Now I will say something because I want to make a point here that I ended up learning, because I went from mindfulness and then I started like interfacing with sports psychologists, and I love sports, and I'm in New England, so I'm just assuming you're all crazy Red Sox and Celtic fans. Keeping track. But I had this sports psychologist friend who I became friends with, and he does the sports that are like, I forget the name of it, but they do like crazy stuff. They do like rock climbing and jump out of planes with to try to hit a net that's like whatever. And he does football teams. He does the Seahawks. He does the Vegas Raiders. He does the Bills. Anyway, he taught me this idea. You know how you get in the flow state? So high performers get into this flow state. And he was telling me that you have three places your mind can be basically three states of mind. You can have positive mind, you could have negative mind, or you can have no mind. And no mind is flow state. You're like completely in the present moment. And you can train your mind to be, periodically into, complete present moment awareness. And we see it in sports activities all the time, musicians, people on a stage at a theater. They're just in the moment completely. Now, what's interesting about this is he said, our research all says that you cannot get into no mind from negative mind. You can only get to no mind from positive mind. He says just because you have a positive mind doesn't mean you're going to get in the flow state. He says, but you have zero shot of getting in the flow state if you have a negative mind. And so he trains people on athletes, what to say to themselves. So he completely retools their inner dialogue of, of the stress response of pressure. You don't tell yourself, oh my God, I'm going to miss this putt, Ellen Musinski. All right? I'll give you a personal lesson afterwards on how this applies to your golf game. You know, I'm going to miss this putt. I'm going to miss this putt. Oh my God, there's a million people around here. And he has these phrases that I have like brainwashed my 11-year-old who plays sports already. You say, I'm dialed in. I'm dialed in. I'm dialed in. I can do difficult things. I can do difficult things. And the big one I think is, I've done this before. Like if you've practiced it a million times, I've done this before. I've done this before. So the point of all this is there are actual proven techniques that we know, backed by science, that are in a little box now for elite athletes and maybe some CEOs who have enough money to be able to access some of this stuff, that should be accessible and taught in every freaking school in America, so that every kid, you know, regardless of their situation, can learn how to get themselves out of fight or flight mode, how to get themselves in a mindset of winning or success or learning or whatever. And so, you know, we've learned more about the brain in the last 20 years than we have in the previous 200. And yet the problem in society today, and I think the big leap forward that AI is helping with, is how do we take this knowledge and actually get it distributed to the public so that we can, you know, actually make the kind of investments in people that make sense. And this is my last piece here before I get off my soapbox and rant that I'm on, complete rant. This is where I think there's common ground, because it's not just like a liberal, we have to throw more money at it. And it's not just a conservative, we need to dismantle it. It's like, what are we going to build? You know, like I think people elected the current president to actually just blow the system up because it's not working for him. And he's doing a decent job of that right now. So the next question is, it's when's it going to be time to build? And are we going to have all this knowledge that we're going to be able to take off the shelves and put down into these systems to, you know, bring about, you know, a complete reformation of the country?
It's really interesting that you're talking about this in the educational context too, because I was going to ask you about what class you might, given all of your experience in the legal system in a variety of different ways, what class you might add to law school. I mean, we're an innovative law school. We were built to be thinking about things in a new way. What's this 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 version? What class should we incorporate into our curriculum that might be out of the box, but is really a skill that's needed for the next generation of lawyers?
I would design a class around something like that, you know, around mindset in law. You know, I mean, be legal psychology, or I don't know how you'd phrase it, but something along those lines, because I think it would apply across the board, you know, regardless of, you know, what legal vertical we're in, and especially in the courtroom and all the kind of interaction that would happen there. You know, I think this would be right up Buzz's alley, something like this. I remember, you know, I had interest in meditation and stuff, and I remember Buzz saying in the first class I took with him in, was it Moot Court or whatever, what was it called, Moot Court? It's been a long time. Trial ad, thanks, Angel. I think you helped me get through trial ad too, Angel. But I remember him saying, if you get stuck, breathe. Don't forget to breathe. I was like, because I was always kind of into meditation, stuff like that. I was like, oh, Buzz is a meditator. But I just remember, so it's like you take that concept and just enhance it. I think that'd be a really cool course.
Do you feel like there's a decision that you would have made that would have gone differently had you not been focused on meditation and mindfulness?
A decision I would have made differently.
Like when you in office.
If I didn't have meditation and mindfulness? Well, I had it and I made a lot of really bad decisions anyway. I mean, that's the kind of funny part about it, is you think like, oh, I'm gonna meditate and I'm never gonna do anything wrong again. And you're like, yeah, right. That's not how it works. It does help you prevent some things. Like there have been moments in my life, more like in my relationship with my wife, where I had a little, because they say it's between, these kind of techniques help you extend the space between stimulus and response. And it comes in very handy in a marriage to like, like, I'm so glad I paused for a second before I said something so dumb that I'd have been cleaning up for a week.
Do you have a 90-second sort of practice or something that you do that would be helpful to all of these folks to learn in just a quick sort of down and dirty?
Yeah, people are standing. It'd be kind of hard. I could tell you that my experience is. I mean, you could, if you close your eyes and really follow your breath. It's kind of like when you do that. You just put your feet on the floor and you sit and try to sit upright, and you close your eyes, and if you shut everything off, you will immediately recognize how many crazy thoughts are going around in your head. Like that you're like, oh my God, is that happening all day long? I remember I did my first retreat, and it was a 5-day retreat, and it became more and more silent as we were going. And by the second or third day, it was complete silence. And I remember sitting in the cafeteria, and we're all sitting in the cafeteria, and no one's talking. And I can hear the forks on the plate, ding, 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 ding. You can hear the chairs scooting on the floor, making noise. And I remember going to get a cup of coffee, and I just sat there. And the cup of coffee's in front of me, and it's got steam coming out. Now, I haven't talked to anybody for 24 hours at this point, and I'm staring at my coffee, and the steam's coming out like this, and I'm going, wow. Does that do that all the time? Am I like missing this show that's going on right now with the steam coming out of my coffee? And it was just an example of like how much you miss. Like because you're like in your head all the time or in your phone, and I'm as guilty as anyone else, so I'm not like lecturing, I'm just saying it's awesome to just remember, and like kids and grandkids are awesome to help you like pull you back into the present moment, because you're like, oh my God. You're like your spouse could try to tell you a story, and you're like grabbing your phone and thinking about work tomorrow or whatever, but your kid comes and he tells you, Dad, you know what happened today at school? And I'm like, tell me every word. And you're just, or a baby, you're just present moment awareness, and you can train your mind on how to do that. And so I just say, take some time just to sit, like to be. We're human beings, we're not human doings, right? Just be, and you start to see your mind and start to understand your mind, know thyself, like know what those thoughts are. And a lot of them stem from anxieties and traumas, but if you know them, you'll be less reactive to them. The Navy SEALs do a box breathing, in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. And you do that, and the Navy SEALs do that for all the benefits we've already talked about. So there's these techniques that we have. Again, we should be teaching this to people, like healthcare providers, before we throw you on some kind of anti-anxiety medication, we should at least try it. Maybe you will need anti-anxiety medication, but let's try some of this stuff first. And if you try it early on and we teach people how to deal with stress, you may not need it in the long run.
Yeah. I think our students certainly need that kind of thing more than ever now.
I just talked to them. They said all the teachers need that stuff. So that's the conflict.
I actually just took a few days off, and I went hiking I was in Japan, and I went hiking because in order for me to kind of get in that flow state, I have to be doing something hard physically with my body, because I get so caught up in my own head. And I was determined that I would come back with this like clarity that I would continue on through the rest of my life. It's been like 3 days, and I'm already like, I forget it all. But I have to ask you, one of the things I've been thinking about is just manufacturing. There's been such a push now on manufacturing. And my grandparents started their adult lives in Ohio, and then moved to West Virginia, and they were involved in farming and manufacturing, and that area is, sort of, I think a lot of people in West Virginia, my dad lives in Ohio now, want to see manufacturing come back, and there have been pushes on a national level to kind of make that happen. Do you think that it's possible to bring manufacturing back in the U.S. in a meaningful way? And what would be what's the best way to do that as we think about kind of everyday workers in the United States, especially in that area?
Yeah, I think it has to be the high-end manufacturing. I think the days of us, making all kinds of shoes and trinkets and stuff, those have moved offshore. They're, kind of lower end manufacturing, I think.
But my grandfather made cardboard boxes, so he could have a whole.
Oh yeah,
this could be the Amazon.
That could be the unicorn here. Yeah, a manufacturing renaissance with cardboard. I could see it. I could see it. Yeah, like the high end chip manufacturing, the plant in Ohio. There's $1,000 a year. That's in Ohio. That's a really good income. So you can make it, and then the spin-off from that, and the fabs, the construction of the fabs that they'll work in. So I think focused on the high-end stuff is kind of the way to go. But I think we need to sit down with a lot of really smart people, because we're not going to have the number of jobs. When I grew up, there was a General Motors factory just outside of Youngstown, Ohio, which is like halfway between Cleveland and Pittsburgh. Steel belt, rust belt, auto belt, the whole 9 yards. There were 16,000 workers who worked at the General Motors plant, all United Auto worker, making really good money. And then there was a Delphi plant that supplied the wiring harnesses to the General Motors plant. There were 13,000 workers there. They were all IUE CWA union. That's where my dad worked swing shifts there, and he was white collar. But people were doing really well, and then that rippled throughout the community. And then there would be some steel mills with 1,000, 1,500. They're all empty. They're all empty. And I think that's the trauma, that's the anxiety. It's still in the DNA. Even if you have a good job and you live in Youngstown, Ohio, or Manchester, I'm sure it's the same in New England in so many ways. Even though you have a good job, you still think that, the shoe's gonna drop and you're gonna lose it. And so there's how do you feel about the economy? Well, not good. You got a job? Yeah. You gonna lose it? Probably not. How do you feel about the economy? Bad. You see it in the polling, you see it in the data all the time. So I think the high-end manufacturing, but one of the things we have to do is rebuild these older communities. When NAFTA came to our area, it just ravaged our community. And those plants closed, and they moved right over the border, and they shipped the products back over, and those factories went from 16,000 to 0. And a lot of our people had to go train the worker in Mexico to basically take their job that eventually happened a year or two later. That trauma is still in our community. So all the economic stuff and the manufacturing and making things and the mental health and the other stuff we already talked about, it's all interconnected. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, and Trump, to his credit, said, I'm going to try to fix this. And he's clearly a bull in a china shop, but people are he's trying to fix it. Mm-hmm. No one else tried to fix it. No one else acknowledged all this was going on, at least at the level and kind of clarity that he did. And so I think you need an industrial policy. I voted for the CHIPS Act. When it came, I thought it was a bipartisan bill to incentivize chip manufacturing in the United States, and I think it's working. I think some of the clean energy stuff probably went a little far on the spending on it, which is why we still had some inflationary issues. But trying to outcompete China on battery manufacturing, we have 2,000 jobs now in a battery plant back home. UAW making $30, $35 an hour. So not bad, considering. So those kind of things, I think we've got to stay focused on that. But I think there's a lot of other things we have to innovate and educate and get people skilled up and not be focused on college for everybody, but get people in the skilled trades where there's going to be huge shortages of plumbers and pipe fitters and electricians. Like, those guys are aging out now. And so but we don't have the new workers to come in because we spent 30 years telling everybody they got to go to college. And we got rid of shop class. We got rid of home ec and some of these basic fundamental things. So anyway, manufacturing is going to be a component of that, but it won't be the whole thing like it used to be.
One of the things, you were talking many years ago about sort of China's plan for a 50-year plan on road stuff, and that we need as a country to be developing those sorts of long-term. That's
the most threatening thing of our political division, is you have a competitor, like China, and it's not a like, oh my God, be afraid. It's like, no, they have like a quasi-capitalistic system that gives them a lot of advantages, some disadvantages, but they have a 100-year plan. And if we have we're going all in on clean energy, whether it was perfect or not, it wasn't perfect. Like the Inflation Reduction Act bill and all that, it wasn't perfect, but it was a down payment on we need to try to outcompete China on batteries and electric vehicles. And so here we go. And then 2 years later, it's like, we're going to undo all this because the other guy did it. As opposed to saying, what can we take that's working here and like build on that, and take what's not working and toss it. It didn't work, like Franklin Roosevelt used to say. Like, if it works, we'll keep doing it. If it doesn't work, we'll try it and throw it out and try something new. Meanwhile, China's going boom, 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 boom. Here's our plan. We used to have that, right? If you think about Eisenhower to Kennedy, right? It was very much, we're going into space, and then Kennedy juiced it, but like that was started with Eisenhower, and that was all spun out of the war and the technologies that were kind of coming out of World War II. And Eisenhower's like, we got to connect the country. We need infrastructure. We're going to do the interstate highway. And Kennedy said, well, we're going to go to the moon, and we're going to try to do this. And then Johnson came in and said, well, we got to do, the Great Society. It got to the point where it was so kind of coordinated, like the general American strategy, both in foreign policy and domestic, that it was Nixon who signed the EPA into law, right? I mean, and Nixon, like, literally got in a fight, and you can read up on this, like, he literally got in a fight. He was ready to do universal health care, but Ted Kennedy didn't want him to do it because he still hated Nixon from the election 10 years prior. But the point is, like, community development block grants signed into law by Richard Nixon, because it didn't matter if it was a Democrat or Republican president. It was the American strategy to do things. And now, like, if someone said, what's the American strategy on X, Y, or Z? It was like, well, who's in office, right? That would tell you everything. So if a Democrat comes into office after Trump, they need to say, he did some things, and we may not have liked what he did, but we should maybe figure out how to keep him and make him work better. How do we build on it? And get rid of the kind of things that have been destructive, and try to start building a national consensus around some things. Because if not, no one says you're just going to be the superpower. No one just says you're going to be America. It's a choice every generation has to make.
Yeah, that's kind of bringing us full circle. I guess as we're wrapping up, a lot of people come to New Hampshire and announce that they're running for president. You don't want to go sort of out of the box and announce that you're running for governor here, do you?
This would be the pause between stimulus and response I would like to implement right now. My wife will be like, how was your trip to New Hampshire? Well, I kind of announced announced for president up in New Hampshire? I don't know if that'd be a good idea. Yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. But I think about this stuff a lot, and I hope that we can figure out how. I do think, since you brought it up, I'm announcing. No, I'm kidding. I think that like the inflection point for the Democrats will be in the presidential. The midterms will be very much about who's in power and if the Democrats can win the House back and all that good stuff. But the Democrats need, and I say this as a Democrat who has really upset many national Democrats, like I'm number one on the Republican hit list, and the problem is I'm also number one on the Democrat hit list. But we have to have, the Democrats have got to be reform-minded as a party. And I thought Kamala made a huge mistake when they said, what would you do differently on The View? And she said, I don't think I can think of anything I would do differently. In a change election, and people still, that's how Trump got elected, because he was going to be the change candidate, and they weren't really sure how he was going to do it, but they knew he was going to try to do it, and that's exactly what's happening. And so if that presidential primary will be hopefully a reset a la Bill Clinton in '92, when for 12 years Democrats were kind of in the wilderness. And I hope that whoever does it is tying all of this stuff together, because it's so juicy. It's so like fun to even like talk about, like, oh my God, this could be great. Like if we reform education in this way and reform healthcare in that way, and we start building stuff again, we're taking care of our kids with brain science that we've actually studied and know it works, and we're going to try to make sure every kid has access to it, whether you're a rich white kid in, Upper East Side of New York, or you're a black kid in Harlem or Youngstown. Like, you should learn this stuff. So that could be a really fun campaign. So maybe I'll do it.
Yeah.
Screw it. We're going to Barley House after. We may announce outside Barley House tonight. Angel's like, do it. DJ's like, come on, do it.
I should have brought more scotch. Okay. Well, thank you, Tim. Thank you for modeling.
Can I say something real quick? I just want to say thank you. Like 2.5 of the best years of my life were in this building, in this neighborhood, with these guys here. And I don't know like how many law schools I would have been able to like resonate with. And when I came here and I met Ellen, and I walked through and I heard about the open door policy, and I met some of the other students, I was just like, I can't believe I ended up here from Ohio. And I had an apartment right above Washington Street Cafe. It was like, talk about divine intervention. I was like, how did I get I'd smell coffee every morning in my upstairs. But this is such a special place that when you guys call, like, I come because I want to support what everybody here is doing, what all the alumni are doing, what the kids are doing here, and just the whole philosophy here is so important and so culturally important to the legal profession that I'm all in. So I want to say I love you, thank you. This is a great place, and let's keep it rolling for another 50. Let's have a 100-year plan for Franklin Pierce.
I love it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.